comrades, brothers and sisters. It's a real pleasure to have been invited to such a brilliant turnout at a meeting. And this is only at the early stages of the cuts. We're going to be having much bigger meetings than this in due course, I've got no doubt whatsoever. Apparently we're all in this together, we've been told, but some people seem to be doing slightly better than the rest of us. Just in today's paper, I don't know if people saw this, Eric Daniels, the boss of Lloyds Banking Group, who the taxpayer bailed out to the tune of £20 billion, is due to retire, and his walk away with a cash and shares equivalent to £14 million. So that's not bad for running one of the banks that got us into this mess, apparently. And it is remarkable if you think about it. Just 2 years ago, in the public mind, the villains of the peace were the bankers of Northern Rock, Lloyds, Lehman Brothers, Royal Bank of Scotland, and in 2 years we've seen a sustained campaign that has managed to shift the political agenda from talking about the banks and the chaos in the economy to public sector workers, and suddenly they're to blame. It wasn't Eric and his friends, it was the people who clean your schools, your hospitals, who feed your kids their school dinners and so on. Apparently they caused the crisis. And some of our members have a bit of a black sense of humour. I was reading one of these email discussions that people have, and one of our members said, "I'd like to apologise to the world for my role in bringing about the world financial disaster." So there you go. But the remarkable thing is that sustained campaign has, on the face of it, won some support in public opinion. There are opinion polls that say, you know, there is broad support for the idea of the cuts. Because, of course, there seems to be a logic. You know, we owe £900 billion or whatever it is. You need, obviously, to pay that back. The people are asked to view it as though, imagine if it was your household budget, you would have to sort it out. And that's why the government claims that they've got this backing. But I think there's a real difference between cuts in the abstract and real cuts on the ground. When you start to think about what does this mean for your school, what does it mean for your hospital, what does it mean for your parents' care home or whatever. And we've just done some survey, a public opinion survey in relation to the Fire and Rescue Service, and quite remarkable figures. 85% of people said that they oppose any cuts in Fire and Rescue Service budgets. 95% of people said they oppose any cuts in the number of firefighters available. So that's, I'm not arguing the fire service is a special case. We're obviously fighting our corner as the fire service, but I think we have to oppose cuts in general. But I think the point is, when you start to ask people about real cuts and the real impact of it, of what this government's agenda is, people will very, very rapidly start to move against what they're doing. And I mentioned Eric Daniels. Other people have done very well during that period. I don't know if people saw the report on the Sunday Times Rich List earlier this year, but the 1,000 richest people in the country have seen their wealth increase by £77 billion, bringing their total wealth to £335 billion, which is equal to more than 1/3 of the total national debt. That's just 1,000 people. 1,000 individuals, not taking into account the big businesses and the banks and so on. The number of billionaires over the past year rose from 43 to 53. And this is what the writer said. The rich have come through the recession with flying colours. The stock market's up, the hedge funds are coining it in, the rich are doing very nicely. The rest of the country is going to have to face public spending cuts, but it has little effect on the rich because they don't consume public services. Or just another example, in March of this year, when there was a debate around whether the economy was beginning to start recovering, and an article looking at the increase in national income. National income had increased by £27 billion over the previous year. Of that, £24 billion had gone to increased profits, and just £2 billion of it had gone to increased wages. So if you think about it, a crisis that we didn't cause, that the taxpayer then bails out the banks to the tune of billions and billions of pounds, and as the economy starts to recover, the people who benefit are the very people, the very organisations who sparked the crisis in the first place. And I think it shows the very real agenda that we face, and I think it is a class agenda. It's about the people who run this society saying that their system is in crisis, and the people who are going to pay for it is you lot, the majority of people out there. The majority are asked to pay for the errors and mistakes of the minority. And I think that ordinary people, working people in trade unions, in community groups, people who use public services will have no alternative but to resist and to fight back. And that will mean fights will take place in all sectors of public services. And I think one of the agendas we have to set here is to build that unity across different trade unions, across different workplaces, across different sectors, between people who deliver services and people who use them, and so on. There's been a debate, as some of you will know, at the TUC recently about a national demonstration. There's been some argument and about when that should be. I think the main thing about the national demonstration is when the TUC, and they will now call a national demonstration, we have to work to ensure that that is an absolutely huge, momentous event that really puts a marker down that public opinion, the people of the United Kingdom are swinging against the cuts agenda that we face. And at the TUC, I was at the TUC, and Brendan Barber made reference to the poll tax and said that this could be a poll tax moment. Well, I think that's a good analogy. And at the time of the poll tax campaign, yes, the official movement, the trade unions and so on, opposed the poll tax, but there was also a movement that went far, far beyond a few trade union leaders, far, far beyond the TUC. And I was involved in an anti-poll tax union here in Tower Hamlets at the time. Millions of people, ordinary people who'd never been involved in politics before, began to say, this is not fair, we're going to get organised, and either in an organised or sometimes in an unorganised way said, actually, we're simply not complying and we're not going to pay your poll tax. And ultimately did inflict a huge defeat upon the Thatcher government. So I think there will be opposition, there will be struggle, and the challenge that we face is whether that is going to be joined up and coordinated and generalised or not. I don't know, there will be various sparks. You know, in our employers, they talk about how much they care for firefighters, but as soon as the budget was announced, they moved very quickly to write to us and say, we're not in a position to offer you a pay rise for 2010. That's how much they care about the firefighters who deliver their service. So pay and the pay freeze can be a spark to that. The threat to public sector workers' pensions, which again, immediately in the aftermath of the crisis, you saw a campaign in the right-wing press, in the Daily Mail and the Telegraph, to say, actually, what we really need to sort out is these gold-plated public sector workers' pensions. And it's an absolute scandal and a disgrace, and trying to drive a wedge between those who work in the public sector and those who work in the private sector. My position is all working people should have the right to a decent pension and to be able to retire in dignity. We have local campaigns up and down the country about closing this fire station or cutting it at night or whatever, and it always amazes me. They say, no, we can't afford this fire station. You look at it and you think, this has been here 100 years. How come 100 years ago we could afford to have a fire station on this street corner, but now, when we are infinitely richer than we were then, suddenly we can't afford it? To me, that just shows the nonsense that needs to be exposed, this idea that we can't afford decent public services. And we do need to personalise it with people, to say, this means your mum or your dad in their care home. That's what cuts means. It means destroying some of the vestiges of humanity, decency and civilization that we have in this society. And they have always told our people that there is no alternative. They're saying now there's no alternative to the cuts. Well, I'll finish on this. They have told us that for generations, and if we had listened to them then, we would never have won the right to vote. And if we had listened to them then, we would never have won the right to be in trade unions. And if we had listened to them then, we would never have won the National Health Service or the right to education in the first place. So if they say there's no alternative, my answer, and I think the answer of working people for generations, has been, if you haven't got an alternative, then we will build our own alternative ourselves. Thank you very much.